When was the last time you had a conflict as a leader that led to a positive result? Join me and Ellen Sprenger from Spring Strategies to discuss creative ways to generate new possibilities during conflict situations in this episode of Leadership Moves. If you're excited about this video, please hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified every single time we post a new video. And do share this with your community. Now, on to the episode. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to this conversation about how do we address conflict in generative ways and creative ways, in ways that create more possibilities for ourselves and our organizations. Let me introduce to you our speaker for today, Ellen Sprenger from Spring Strategies. Ellen is known to many of you, a familiar face, a familiar force. She is a dear friend who has been one of my greatest teachers in the area of organizational development, in developing skills and tools and practices to really show up as leaders with presence and with creativity. She has worked with, at this point, I think hundreds of organizations in building their capacity around financial resilience, visioning, broader strategy, and more. You can read a lot more about her on the website, and we shared her bio with you as well in the description of the webinar that we sent to you.
Thank you, Mallika, and hello, everybody. It's really good to be in this space. I'm seeing familiar faces and familiar names. Wonderful. So we have the next 50 minutes together to explore approaching conflict in generative and creative ways. And if you are a little bit like me, you probably go, yeah, that's hard, because it is really hard. And there's so much tension, conflict, volatility in the world. So how do we move with that in creative and generative ways, I think is the challenge of our time in so many ways. So there's sort of two dimensions to that. So one dimension is what we need to cultivate inside ourselves, to really have awareness of how we respond to tension and conflict so that we can also catch ourselves a little bit, right? So for example, myself, when there's tension and conflict, my impulse is to move in, to get really curious and energized by it, right? That can be really great because I want to pursue clarity, right? I want to move in. But if I lose connection with the group, it's not so helpful, right? It could be experienced as confrontational or maybe even aggressive, right? So the medicine, the gift, and the fixation, right? You might be somebody who wants to move away from conflict. When conflict arises, you have a tendency, your whole body is like, holding breath and moving away. And that could be very wise in a moment, but in another moment, another situation, that could be just really, really not generative because you could also stonewall, you kind of block the whole conversation. So our interior is not what we're going to be talking about, but I just want to mention it, that dimension of dealing with tension and conflict is really important. And I understand from Mallika that you've worked on that, maybe in other sessions. So our interior, our sort of like habitual way of responding and to have cultivate awareness around that is sort of 50%, right, of this conversation. We're going to focus on the world around us and more specifically our own organizations, networks, and movements. So approaching conflict, creative tension in our own organizations and movements. And I'm going to be presenting a little bit of content, but then very soon, I hope we can co-create something and practice together. Right. So whatever comes up for you in terms of your own experiences, that's great because let's try to also work with that. So let me bring up the slides, screen share. All right. So that's the title. And so, so we're going to locate it in our own organizations and movements. And here's a bold statement. There's no growth without conflict. Conflict is good news. And it raises the question, how can we work with conflict and tension in healthy ways? So if conflict is good news, then something is wanting to emerge. Something is wanting to be included. There's a wisdom, right? But we can only harvest the wisdom if we can be with it in creative and generative ways. So that's sort of a an underlying piece of this conversation. So then here we go in you know, in my own sort of history of running organizations, I've always, and looking back, you know, it's like this question is so critical. So let's say I'm running an organization or I'm part of an organization, and tension, we have tension around a certain issue. We're going to explore certain issues that tend to come up. Is it a problem to solve? As in, is there a right or wrong answer? Or is it just an ongoing polarity that we'll always have? Because it's alive in the system. It should be, because it sparks and it generates new ideas and helps us see and hold more complexity, right? So is it a problem to solve or an ongoing polarity to manage? So let's look at some examples. So, and this is so interesting because I'm not sure about all of us, but I think it's safe to say that we are trained, our education system trains us to look for problems, solutions in terms of right and wrong answers, right? So we go to a binary quite quickly. So a problem literally has a right answer or multiple right answers that are independent, whereas polarities or creative tensions have two or more right answers that are interdependent. So we're going to be playing with this. For example, a problem, of course, math. How can I get to the top of this mountain? There are multiple right answers, right? Even, you know, flying to the moon is a problem to solve. But what if I have 3 children and I want to give each of them a gift and want to respond to both their uniqueness and I want to treat them equally, right? So I cannot prioritize their uniqueness, right? A unique gift for each of the children to, you know, treating them equally, that they feel they've been treated equally, right? This is a creative tension. So what does that look like, right? Let's make it a little bit more concrete. So you could visualize it by using the infinity sign, very powerful. And I'll give you an example of my own initial response to the COVID pandemic, to just make it real, you know, and do a little bit of storytelling. So when the pandemic hit, I went to a state of alertness immediately. And I was looking at the situation. I have family in different parts of the world. So I'm thinking, okay, what's happening in this part of the world there? You know, kind of what can I learn from how other people are responding, how this is progressing. And so I found myself being in an alert state and finding it really hard to relax, right? And as I was in this alert state, you could say there's an upside to that and a downside of that. And I've spent most of my time in the sort of downside of alertness, being very reactive, almost impulsive, and a little bit maybe almost feeling slight panic, you know, inside, like, whoa, am I in the right place on the universe, right? Am I with the right people? How is this gonna, you know, how can I support my community? Is everybody actually realizing what's happening? So what I was struggling with is relaxation. Right now, if we kind of fill out this polarity, you could say the upside of alertness is smart precaution, which is a good thing, right? And the upside of relaxation is to be able to reflect, pause, you know, also rest physically. But the downside of relaxation is inertia, disconnect, passivity, right? So what I was doing is kind of stuck in the limitations of alertness. And I found it really, really hard to rest, because what I was afraid of was inertia and disconnect, right? And I was really triggered by people who were kind of pretending like nothing was going on. So this is where I actually drew this polarity, because I was like, okay, I need to kind of get a little bit more perspective. And I zoomed out and I created this. And I was like, whoa, how can I be with, you know, have smart precaution while also being able to reflect and rest? That just calmed me right down. It's like, okay, I can do both, right? Rather than fixating on panic and fear of, you know, inertia. So here is a way, and this, I'm going to leave this tool with you, is how you can build your polarity, right? So I would say sometimes I think I'm too panicky, reactive, right? at those times, so we're going around the, you see, I'm going around the infinity sign. At those times, I wish I would like to relax more, right? But what I fear is if I do too much relaxation, I'll just become, separate, inertia, I'll fall asleep, I'll just disconnect from the whole situation. What I value greatly and that can lead to more alertness is smart precautions. So that's how you can build a polarity. Now let's look at something that we often see in our organizations. You might actually be experiencing this polarity. So let's play together and see if we can build this one together. So, and I know I see some smiles, like, when you have a smile and you go this knowing smile, like I see Diana looking at this, like, yeah, I know this story, right? So as we see a lot of transitions in our organizations. I think at one point I heard that in the build community, and I'm not sure, Mallika, if this is correct, that almost 40% of the organizations that are part of build are going through leadership transition. There is this sort of old power transition to new power, very interesting, different ways of working with power, of understanding leadership, etc. Then okay, so this sometimes, or could be a tension that we need to manage. So I would love to hear from some of you if you recognize this. Do you want to come and jump in and build this with me and see if we can identify the upsides and the downsides of each?
So I mean, this is exactly, I think, talking to some of the current situation at the Disability Rights Fund, where I'm the founding executive director, and in my last month of leadership. And this has been, a tension as I'm, over the last couple of years, as I'm passing, as the organization has grown, has a second layer of leadership, new leaders, and the disability rights movement has grown as well, and disability rights philanthropy. So, there is this trajectory of movement towards the future, which is what I want. At the same time, I don't want to be forgotten. So, because I did a lot of hard work. So I don't know if that helps here, but yes, that's.
And so what would be the upside of honoring the past, kind of looking, zooming out, disability rights movement or any other space, that you're familiar, what would be the upside? I heard something about legacy, right? It's about legacy. See, maybe I should say a little bit more about how this tension could create a lot of hurt and pain in organizations, right? Is there somebody who can share an experience like that? And Mallika, also please come in if there's something that jumps at you, right? Like Mallika's laughing.
Jen and I just went through kind of an experience of about this, because we're coming out with a report on our participatory grant making and participatory processes. And it was a painful process because there was an external researcher who really, wanted to do a good job, but didn't know much about participatory grant making or the history of the organization. The first version of the report was missing a lot of key history, and there was tension in, well, but this is what I heard, and this is what my research and the history, the actual history.
Great, yeah,
was very painful.
So I'm hearing a couple of things. I'm also looking at the chat, right? So I hear knowing where we came from, right? Like we need to know where we come from, because that's where our strengths come from. That's where legacy comes from, right? We're standing on the shoulders. So also it's about honoring our elders, the ones, you know, that have gone before, that were there, that were part of the building. That's right. And now what if we go overboard with honoring the past? Can we just go there too? Like, what could that bring? What would be the downside of honoring the past? Vivian, you want to come in? Stifle innovation. Yeah. So I would say rigidity, right? There's a rigidity in that. That's right. Stifling.
Well, I also think that the past, as it can bring you to the present, and probably there are good principles that you have to safeguard and maintain. There were bad moves in the past as well. So you have to learn from them. There are lessons learned there, so you don't repeat what was done wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, which is an important part of honoring the past, right? That you can also, you know, look at lessons learned. Yeah, lessons learned should be part of it. Absolutely. So honoring the past could be, you know, the downside could be stifling. I also want to say fear of loss. You know, maybe old leadership and new leadership or different generations, you know, have found themselves in or find themselves in, and that nuance needs to be really understood, so that you can have a continuation, but also some things, you know, letting go and welcoming in the new, right? So how do you do both well is, I think, the story, the experience that you're sharing. And I think that's a huge challenge. And because we're also now seeing the intergenerational dynamic that sometimes pops up here, right? And different generations sometimes go with different experiences, but also different worldviews. And so how do you build strong organizations? So if we go to the upside then of welcoming the future.
I think in some ways, the honoring the past and honoring the legacies of the founders, I think those will always happen. And our fear of our legacies being forgotten, I think that's the first thing that we have to deal with, because over the years, I've come to realize that they don't actually go away. The legacy is in the work you do. So you may not be remembered personally. And it's a battle with yourself to say, is it I who wish to be remembered, or is it the work that should continue? And if the work is continuing, then I think that's an important thing. The second thing you just mentioned, intergenerational. And I was going to say when you were talking earlier, I was thinking when you were talking earlier, that the tensions, the conflict is also a conflict of generations. And if the people who are taking over that power are closer to you in age, in experience, the transitions are a little bit easier. If they're much younger, in my organization, there's a 40-year gap between those who might take over and me. And that 40-year gap in feminism means so much has radically changed, including ways of working, ways of thinking, ways of interacting. And therefore, the struggle is for me to understand where they're coming from and not to feel hurt by it, but to look at how they are committed at this age to a future. And I think that it's really hard. I don't want to undermine, say it's easy. It's really hard, but you have to unlearn so much of what you have learned. And the last thing that I want to say, and I know this is not a politically correct thing to say, and I would not say it in a forum where I had lots of young people around me because they'd hit me on the head with it. But all of you who are sort of founders of organizations, is that very often people are not ready for leadership. They're frightened of it. And so you might end up going 2/3 of the way, where endless discussions have taken place about letting go of power on one hand and about taking power or accepting it and dealing with it on the other. But in the end, you find that this is not a responsibility I want to take all my life, and you opt out. And so how does one work with younger people to take away that fear of power?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think Urvashi, what you're doing, you're actually taking us to the other side. So to the sort of like, welcoming the future, how to do that well as an organization, right? Because it requires letting go, some things, because I think it's interesting how most of our focus so far has gone on the left side, right? Honoring the past. But if we jump to the other side, what I hear you say is also letting go, trust, but maybe also providing some kind of support, but not in a stifling way, right? And I think, Tassila, you also mentioned it's like when young people come in, the next generation, like how to create a space for them to build and continue, but also have freedom and space to shake things up, right? And that's relative to, the mission and its intergenerational dynamics. So maybe we can hear a little bit more, because the new perspectives and innovations, we could say, is the upside, right, of welcoming the future, as well as staying relevant, connecting with what is in the moment. And I'm noticing now, I'm in my late 50s, how I see the world is so much based on experience, is so much based on the past. I sometimes wonder, like, what do I really see? And how do I need to cultivate sort of finding the culture point of now? Who do I need to surround myself with? What do I need to read or watch or have conversations about, right? So if we jump to, welcoming the future, like what would be the upside and some of the maybe downsides of that, right? And I think the downside I've also heard is a sort of recklessness, right? Maybe even recklessness could potentially be, it's like, okay, storming in, new generation, forget the past, fixating maybe on the problems, the things that have gone wrong in the past, and saying, clean slate, we're starting over, right? So that could actually hurt, and that could create a lot of conflict, because then you start fighting about, is the past better or the future? And you've turned the polarity into a problem to solve, right? So how to stay with the creative tension in a creative and generative way, what comes up for you when you think about, welcoming the future? And maybe some of us can speak from experience here too. At what Alejandra is saying, like we tend to kind of then create single story also, about generations. So we should be careful. So I think the point is, and also building on what you said, Mallika, it's like as a leader in an organization, and you feel there's a lot of energy going through a certain theme. I remember when I was in one of my earlier jobs, we were always fighting about decentralization versus centralization, where decisions needed to be made, right? And I was happily on the decentralization camp, and we dug ourselves in and we came with 100 arguments, right? And so did the others. And I think for years, we spent so much time like arguing, and it was like in the hallways and people were just like, well, feeling, but if we said, wait a minute, isn't it about the upside, like how to actually get the benefit of decentralization while also having the benefit of centralization, and where's the ideal balance? We could have come together. And so this is an exercise that you can do in your organization. If you find like, whoa, where's the energy going? See if it is actually a polarity. You could even create if we're physically together. I've seen a situation where we would draw on the floor, literally the infinity sign with the pluses and the minuses, and we would create it together. The two camps, the two poles would come together and see, wait a minute, it's a balancing act. And that can release and free so much energy if you get to that space. So that's sort of where the offer of this time together is, go to your organization, see what is in fact a polarity, and together with all the players, start building it, right? And see where the energy frees and where the emergence of wisdom then comes through, right? So I'll say a few more things, and then we can open it up for a discussion again. So let me see, just remove a couple of things. So how to maximize the upside while minimizing the downside. So the benefit of smart precaution as well as reflection and rest, how to feel and acknowledge our roots and strength while also embracing new perspectives and innovation. And then the theme of, what kind of support do we need to give each other? What do we need to put in place so that we can do this as well? If it is about leadership transition, for example, because if you keep prioritizing poles, the energy goes not to finding, the creative generative space, but kind of separating and creating a dichotomy. So so what polarity is working your group? So a couple ones that we sometimes see is very interesting. It's like content versus process, past, future, theory, practice. What is firm? What could be flexible? Where are we the same and where are we different? Unity versus fragmentation or difference, right? Knowing or not knowing, fast, slow, deep, wide, playful, serious. So you can come up with your own. And of course, polarity practice becomes increasingly important as a system or issue increases in complexity, increases in speed of change or resistance to change, right? So it's sort of like, wow, if we can put on the lens of, whoa, am I looking for a polarity here? What can I see? And start drawing it yourself or maybe with your colleagues. It could totally, in my experience from where I facilitated this or where I've done this in my own organizations, it completely frees up creativity and more ease in the organization. So the practical steps, and I'll leave you with that, is zoom out and reflect. Problem to solve, ongoing tension to manage, and ask others to think with you. If it's attention, what are the two poles? And very important is that both poles need to be positive. So you can't have a good and a bad pole, right? That's how you create the polarity. So it's about the upsides of each and the downside of each that you're going to be drawing it. You can move around. You can even do it in virtual room with Post-its on a whiteboard and create it together. And what wisdom emerges. You'll hear different voices because if we're no longer interested in, this is so high stakes and my opinion and my position, and we can look at the whole together and flow with it. That's where the infinity sign, is so powerful. We can explore together without feeling that we need to take one position. It can be really powerful. So yeah, don't do the pole preference. So that's a big sort of like red flag. And the second one, don't try to do a compromise. Really go to all corners of it and keep exploring. And then, of course, in the final stage, when you facilitate this as a group, it's important to then say, okay, what are we learning from this? What are some steps? What are some actions, that we need to put in place?
Yeah, so this is really helpful to me. I am in a new role with a new organization that has recently merged. They worked in the same field and just building up community, and they have a political presence. But they, in the leadership that they have, someone said, I think it's Sonia, that it was kind of like step parents and organizations are siding with one parent or the other. So the situation that I'm in as director of talent and equity and not knowing anything about either of the two that merged together to become a statewide organization is now trying to work with these individuals to get them to adapt to or help create the culture of the organization that it is now. So I am 3 weeks into this position and I feel like I've turned into a counselor. And it's like, how do I get these people to remember where they came from in a good sense, but be able to help create a culture of the new organization that has a new name, to get them to work together. What I'm seeing is that people are leaving, they're very sensitive, this is how it used to be. And I'm tasked with helping create a culture of who we are now. And I really need help with that because it's like, wow, there's a lot of tension. They want it to be a statewide organization, and the only way to do it is to bring these two powerhouse nonprofit organizations together to be able to do that. And so this is helping me. I've taken great notes to, kind of create a thought process and how to do it. But if you can talk to me, about that and share some strategies, it would really be helpful.
Wow, Shannon, I'm just listening to you. I can feel wow, this, two powerhouses, two incredibly successful, organizations coming together, merging, right? Like you can feel the impact of the meaningfulness, the potential of it, the energy of it too, right? Because it's like two streams, two rivers coming together.
Yes.
So the focus is on new, the culture now, and the difference we're going to be making in the world now. But the part of the heart is also in, whoa, fear of loss, right? What are we going to lose that we brought into this river, that is unique? And so definitely the polarity we're playing with is well, alive is an understatement, right? It's kind of exploding, right?
Yes.
In a fireworks, let's say fireworks.
Fireworks is a great way to say it.
Fireworks, yeah. And so the process, so what ideas are you taking away in terms of what you said, like a pathway or process that you could, and then for everybody to maybe jump in and we could do like a little share some ideas and wisdom with Shannon. So, but what are you seeing now that you go, yeah, that's what I'm gonna try?
So where I am now is trying to develop a training plan to help build trust and relationship. So I think those are very important. And then another thing that I've realized is I've been what you may say, been on a listening tour. So I've met with the top executives and the laymen and, everyone. And what I'm also finding is because of this merger, they've added like another layer of leadership. And where you've had people who would answer directly to the executive director, they're now answering, to someone else. And so they're seeing it as a demotion. And it's not a demotion. You're now a statewide organization, so these people are in place to help streamline communication. So I've really been working on trying to develop a training on building trust. Also getting people to realize that, hey, you still bring quality to the table. Now you just have additional people that you can work with. So getting people to believe in the process that they've asked for and not be so quick to draw back, because now you have to build a new relationship with someone. And I've detected some reluctancy in them having to do that. It's no, we used to do it like that. So I've heard that a lot. We used to do it like that, And so it's getting people to say, now we're gonna explore a new way that we all can do it, because you have these two organizations.
That's beautiful. So I think if you draw these polarities here, right, then you can almost collapse the two. So honoring the past, right, is for the organization 1 and organization 2, but embracing the future is where the polarities, where the infinity sign actually comes together, right? So for each to do an exercise of what is great about our past, organization 1, that we want to take forward, and what do we need to let go of that wasn't working, right? And the other organization to do the same. And then the promise of the future, if we bring the best of both together in a sort of reset, like the inspiration that can spark from that, right? To make that map together, right? Because I can only let go of what I hold dear from organization B or whatever, if I trust that it's gonna find a place, and if I can actually communicate that, right? So I could see that exercise being really powerful, because people can just share and put everything on the table, right? Including what they want to let go of and the reason why this merger took place in the first,
We were asking what seems to work. So I'm with the African Women's Development Fund, and I've been here for about a year. And I think one of the things that I didn't do on purpose, but I'm so glad I did because it keeps working for me, is that thinking about the changes in the future, I was asking, what is the foundational ethos that our co-founders had when they created the organization? And any change that we want to do is about how do we transform ourselves after 21 years and everything has changed? Feminist organizing has changed. The world has changed. We have changed. What are the changes that we need to make so that we keep honoring that initial vision in today's world, in today's circumstances? So that's working in terms of like framing the change. What I find a little bit challenging, I would say, is that sometimes the conflict is not in the big, sometimes it's in the big decisions, and sometimes it's in the daily interactions and in the little things. So I think that sometimes you need to anticipate that, and sometimes it's not always possible. And also, you were saying something about like bringing more people, and I'm finding that there's not everybody wants to be responsible for being part of the decisions that are going to hurt. So I think it becomes a lot more solitary than what it's supposed to be, and all of that. So I also find it, like in principle, it makes sense to bring people in, but it's not always something that people want to do, because then you have to be responsible, even if you were just consulted. So those are some things that I thought about when listening to all of you. Thanks.
And I'm also hearing, Françoise, that the transition that you're part of at AWDF is that a lot of it is working really well, and the wisdom in that, right? Because I could see this being a follow-up conversation, Mallika, where people can really share the pieces of what's working, and I love this thing of it, that everybody wants to be part of it or wants to take the responsibility for it, and so clarifying that too, I think could actually free up a lot of energy, because and I would love to hear more about that, Françoise, how that then is working well. Yeah.
I was going to say when it starts working, I'll let you know. But I mean, in terms of the sharing of responsibilities, what I think is because any new thing, everybody wants change until change materializes itself in practical ways. Yeah. And then I don't know about this. So I think the sharing of the responsibility of change.
Yeah, the sharing of the responsibility of change, yeah. And creating moments that mark that. It's like, okay, this is the change we've come to, are we committed to taking this forward? Like, it's almost like ritual around it, or marking the different steps so that there's a before and an after. This is what I'm what I'm also hearing you say, yeah. AWDF. It's a wonderful an organization I know well. Thank you. Megha, how about you?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm Megha Desai from SEWA, Self-Employed Women's Association. So if I share my experience, what we have done, SEWA is working in India, but we also work in SAARC countries, where we start working with the grassroots women, and then at the end of the project, since we are working in other countries and we are not registered, we start work as a project, and we form the organization. We form the organization, and then we are running, and then we have to hand over to the local, the communities. And at SEWA also, we also bring in the new generation, because our organization, we are member-based organization, women's organization, where our members are also third or fourth generation are coming in. And so we also have a management who is having a second generation or so. So transition, I mean, there are differences of in terms of the skill, in terms of the knowledge, in terms of the access, and how we can co-create, how we can know the skills of the older generation and the knowledge and skills of the new generation. Like the old generation have a experience, they have a relationship built with the wider network as an organization, while the new generation comes in, they come with some certain skills of technology or like that. So how we can co-create, and co-creation, it's not easy. So for that, what we do is, it's we believe in the principles, but how based on the principles. If we bring in the new people who believes in the principles, for example, Gandhian principles or so. So based on that, when we are working on revamping or making decisions, it's a partnership. It's in participatory way. So it's not that the management who is leaving, the leaders who is leaving is saying, but
Yeah.
it's our co-creation. The new generation is also saying it, and they also take the ownership.
And what I love, Megha, what you're saying about the core principles, right? That there is absolute clarity about first principles of Seva, and that the manifestation of that can change, right, in the world, like Gandhian principles, like but that the principles are clear. So also new people coming in realize and connect with that very much. So it's almost like that you have foundational pieces, but it's not in a rigid way, but it is in a way of being in the world. We could say values or whatever that are continuous, that you will take forward through the generations. And I can just feel the stability that comes from that, but also the co-creation that makes possible. Like, what is the manifestation in this moment, and that's where we need each other. So that's beautiful, Megha.
And also,
sorry?
It brings ownership.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you in your intervention just now built a polarity in the most beautiful way. So I just want to say you went to the upsides and downsides, and I can just feel the infinity sign, in your conversation. So beautiful. Mallika, I'm going back to you. We're coming to the end of the session.
Yes, we are, Ellen, and what a session and what an incredible conversation. Thanks for listening to the show. Leadership Moves is made possible by the BUILD program of the Ford Foundation. To join my community, please subscribe to my newsletter by clicking the link on the screen or in the description below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel and check out our recommended videos here on the screen. See you next time.